Hey guys, today we are going to start Unit 4, which is called the Progressive Era. And in the Progressive Era, it basically runs from 1900 to 1920. So last unit, we talked about the Gilded Age, and we talked about many of the issues that industrialization brought onto the United States. We talked about poverty, we talked about political corruption. We talked about our cities being overpopulated because of the incoming immigrants and the moving to the cities for jobs. We talked about workers trying to get better rights, but unfortunately, with labor unions, they weren't able to achieve much. So today, with the Progressive Era, we're going to talk about how this unit is trying to fix all the problems that the Gilded Age brought on. And our main topic we're going to talk about today are muckrakers. So with the Progressive Era, this is basically a political movement so that the issues brought from the Gilded Age can be fixed or hopefully resolved. And so with the Progressive Era, we're going to see this unit, there are going to be many challenges to try and fix the problems that we saw, like child labor. We're going to see a big push to promote minimum wage to help with workers and just overall living conditions. We're also going to see in this unit a push for women's rights to try and get women the right to vote. And we will also see political reforms trying to end political corruption. So overall, the whole idea of progress is to make things better. And so the Progressive Era is hoping to fix the problems from the Gilded Age. So the group that really starts the Progressive Era are the muckrakers. We really have to owe this time period to the people who brought the issues to the forefront of our political realm. So muckrakers are basically a term that Teddy Roosevelt gave to journalists who exposed problems. These journalists basically went around and photographed many of the different problems that we saw in society. And so they took these photographs and then published them, and many people were unaware of the problems that were existing. Teddy Roosevelt actually gave these journalists this name, muckrakers, because he said that they were raking up a bunch of muck that he was then going to have to fix. So we're going to see the movement really starts from these journalists. And then next class, we're going to talk about how the government, including Teddy Roosevelt, is going to then fix the problems that they exposed. So one of our first big muckrakers is Upton Sinclair. He wrote a book called The Jungle that exposed the horrible conditions in our meatpacking industry. With the meatpacking industry, he went into the butcher shops and he went into these meatpacking plants, and he basically saw just disgusting situations of just unsanitation and bad practices that saw lots of just disgusting stuff. For example, when he first went in, he went to the one area after they killed the animals, they then skinned them. And he noticed that every person in that room didn't have fingernails because they were literally doing this barehanded. They weren't cleaning the animals properly. They weren't disposing of feces properly, just awful, disgusting situations. And so this book actually led the government to pass the Pure Food and Drug Act and the Meat Inspection Act. These agencies, the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, comes from this. If you've ever watched a commercial for medicine and they say it's FDA approved, that is from Upton Sinclair. The FDA now regulates our medicine and our food, and anytime food is recalled, like when Bluebell was recalled, that was them, the FDA. They also noticed that we had harmful substances in our medicine that they then try to regulate and fix. So Upton Sinclair is definitely going to change the way we consume our food and our medicine. Another muckraker is Ida Tarbell. She actually exposed John Rockefeller as being what she called a robber baron. Basically exposed his greedy practices, that he pretty much hoarded his money and his workers were barely getting paid anything. And so she wrote a book called The History of the Standard Oil Company, and it's pretty amazing that a woman who has no right to vote, no right in the political realm, and she is the one exposing the wealthiest person in the world. Definitely a risk taker there. Another muckraker is Jacob Riis, and he wrote How the Other Half Lives. And with this book, he basically went around and took pictures of tenements. Remember those tenements we talked about last unit that basically showed how people lived? Tiny, tiny little rundown apartments with multiple people living inside. And so Jacob Riis really showed how many Americans are living in these horrible conditions, hoping to get people to feel obligated to help them. And so we'll definitely see charity movements start because of Jacob Riis. Another muckraker is Ida B. Wells. Ida B. Wells is a Black woman who was actually born into slavery, and she ended up writing a book called Southern Horrors, Lynch Laws in All Its Phases. She was an extreme risk taker. She actually traveled throughout the South and took photos of lynchings. Now, lynchings happened pretty much in every town, every weekend, where white supremacist groups, mainly through the KKK, would hang either Black men or Hispanic men, and it was publicized. It was something that they were proud of. She went around and showed the rest of the country about how this happened all the time and how horrifying and terrifying it was for African Americans in the South. The fact that she's a Black woman and she is going around and publicizing and photographing this, definitely courageous and definitely a big risk to take. And she definitely will help with civil rights, which we'll talk about next class. Last one we're going to talk about is Lewis Hine, who exposed child labor. He actually went into factories and went over to ranches and showed children working every day, and showed the harsh conditions that children were facing. Now, Lewis Hine basically is going to be an advocate for public education, because if these kids are stuck in factories all day, they're not getting an education and they're never going to be able to get a career where they can get themselves out of the situation. So he snuck around factories. He did this all undercover, and he took pictures of children. And you can see in these images, not only in factories, but also on the fields, young kids who were stuck in these working situations that they weren't able to get out of. So now you guys are going to get a packet from the substitute, and you are going to go through the pictures below the PowerPoint, and you're going to be a muckraker. These are images that were taken by our muckrakers, and I want you to go ahead and go through each one, and you can talk about them with your group and talk about what do you see and what the issues are that existed. And then you're going to also talk about how you would fix the problems. And you're also going to talk about what complications you'll face when you're trying to fix these problems. So there's 13 images, and you're going to answer your questions on the packet that you got from the substitute. And then you're going to turn that in when you are finished.